Good morning. This is our talk on the chronic miasms, which we set out for today. And I'd just like to introduce ourselves and a little bit of how we're going to go forward. So I'm Jeff from Arcanum Holistic Clinic. I've been on doing some of these in recent weeks. So I hope I will see some of you that I've been seeing on these broadcasts. And Allison, what about yourself? If you want to say a word or two.
Yep, I'm Allison McQuinn. I'm Doctor of Heilkunst Medicine. We've been at this for about 21 years this June, so excited to be celebrating yet another anniversary. And Jill, you can go ahead and introduce yourself, love, and let our audience know who you are.
I've been working with Allison for a couple of years now and just very interested in the Heilkunst method and the healing that I've been going through. And so grateful to be here to talk about chronic miasms.
Brilliant.
Yeah. And I'm actually really glad you're here too, as Allison was just saying moments ago, that yeah, you will be a great force to keep us toned down as far as going off into really highfalutin concepts, but really keep us honest for talking in just regular language. Yeah.
Great.
Okay, so I'm going to bring up our little slideshow here. Let me find my button. Oh, there it is. Okay. And yeah, so let's just jump right in. And we are talking about chronic miasms. And as we go through these slides, I'm going to talk a little bit about the definition of the word miasm. We'll get to that in a second or two. But just to open us right up, like the real big way of thinking about what is a chronic miasm, like from a treatment perspective, in Heilkunst, it's really our key to curing and preventing chronic illness. So it's a pretty basic statement, but a pretty far-reaching one. And let me, so I've set this up to kind of use myself as a story, at least to kick us off here. So back even before I was a student, even I was interested in homeopathy. I was kind of browsing through some books and kind of getting acquainted with some remedies. It was a vast, mysterious field, right? All these. It's a very different way of looking at medicine and looking at how you look at symptoms and how you group all these things together to kind of get a more holistic picture of what you're treating in someone rather than just treating single symptoms. So, anyways, I wasn't even a student yet. I was just kind of a pre-student, and I was seeing a homeopath myself, and I had like what one of the things that led me to homeopathy. This was even before Heilkunst for me. This was just more plain homeopathy. Was I had a lifelong history of seasonal allergies. Right, I spent my childhood on and off allergy meds, like for the symptoms, right? What do you call those? Antihistamines. And so, yeah, that was sort of my childhood. And, it came to my teen and early adult years, and I started to explore more natural modalities. And, this kind of basic homeopathy being one. I was seeing my homeopath, my practitioner, going through all the usual, and I was, fascinated and mystified by how it all worked, all the questions that you get asked by a homeopath, like everything from, your food preferences and how you sleep and what position you sleep in, and it's so specific and weird at first, like you're not used to all that. And he came to give me one of the miasmatic remedies. I mean, I didn't even know the word miasms at that point, but I was kind of looking at my own homeopathy books to look at the remedy he gave me. I know now exactly what it is and why he did it. I didn't. It was kind of a grand mystery to me then. But he gave me sorinum, which is actually our first chronic miasm. We'll get into that. And literally overnight, this was in the middle of allergy season for me. I had no symptoms, no more allergy symptoms. So that was amazing. That was astonishing. And that kind of deepened the mystery for me of, well, what is this thing called homeopathy? How does it work? How did that remedy work? How did my homeopath come to pick that remedy for me? Anyways, I was, as I say, a pre-student. So I knew pretty much nothing at that point other than my curiosity. And I was starting to look at books. So that's the nutshell version of Jeff's story. And Allison, do you have an early student, like a pre-student story or a patient story of yourself and your first encounter with a miasm? Or
The biggest thing was that my son, Jordan, had some major health issues, which brought me to this system of medicine in the beginning. and a lot of ADD, ADHD labels. And so when we cleared the tubercular genetic miasm, all those symptoms disappeared. His capacity for focus and really to be present and calm, and just all the constipation symptoms that he had suffered horribly, hospitalized 7 times for impacted stool. Like, it was very, very serious. And we cleared tuberculinum for him, and it was like a miracle. He shut the door in my face and said, "I'm going to the bathroom." And I'm like, "Oh my God, you haven't done that alone for 5.5 years. Why now?" And so, like you, I became very curious, like, how is it even possible to see results like that on chronic disease?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's, yeah, and we'll be talking more specifically about this, but yeah, there is not, like in Western medicine, contemporary medicine, there is no clear definition of illness and disease. And yeah, they have all these drugs and technologies, and of course, emergency medicine is quite miraculous and quite amazing. But yeah, you get out of the emergency room and you get a whole lot of confusion and a lot of bad medical treatments that are that are resulting. So yeah, clear concept. We'll get to that in a second. What we're talking about. But yeah, so thank you for that. And by the way, we have someone in our audience who's also commented on the fact that he also had lifelong allergies before Heilkens. So yeah, it is a very common thing. Of course, we know that, Allison, with our patients, allergy is so pervasive. Food, environmental, otherwise, but yeah, the miasmatic root to that, of course, we'll get more into that. Okay, so what is the treatment framework for Heilkens? So the basic framework, I've talked about this in any number of videos, and I just want to do a brief recap of the ideas here. And this isn't, what I'm about to say isn't just about Heilkens, like, oh, here we are in our little Heilkens corner having our own little acute ideas or whatever. But what I really should say here is the treatment framework for all medicine, all therapy, all modalities. Like, at a conceptual philosophical level, the laws of nature don't change because you take on a different title. Oh, I'm a massage therapist today, so the laws of nature apply to me like this, or they treat me like this, or I'm a heart surgeon today, so the laws of nature are going to excuse me from these other laws of nature over here. No, we're all under the same laws of nature. So anyways, the just to clarify the word Heilkens, it's really all medicine, all healthcare. And there are exactly and only 3 therapeutic jurisdictions. There's not 4, there's not 5, there's not 2, there's not 10. You can't go and invent a new system of medicine and say, well, my system has 4 jurisdictions. Well, no, that doesn't comply with the laws of nature, as I'm saying, and you won't get it. So a very brief recap, as I say, I've talked about this in other videos. Excuse me, let me just grab a sip of water. We have what we call therapeutic regimen, therapeutic medicine, and therapeutic education. So when we come, the bulk of what we talk about today will be on the chronic miasms. That specifically relates to the middle jurisdiction, the therapeutic medicine. That's where you're curing actual disease, you're actual removing a disease blockages in someone, versus the other two, which can have a bearing on someone's treatment through the miasms, but aren't, strictly speaking, the core of where the miasms are lodged in someone's life force. So the first one, the therapeutic, oh, you have your nice diagram. Maybe I'll put you up in full screen in a second, Allison, to show that. The therapeutic regimen has to do with all the common sense things we think about diet and lifestyle, balancing your diet and getting enough sleep and doing all these kinds of things. The medicine I already mentioned, and then the third jurisdiction, the therapeutic education, that kind of gets into higher realms of really where a lot of the source of chronic illness comes from, even where the chronic miasms have come from. And that gets into issues of, we can call it mind-body medicine, we can call it issues of emotional conflicts, psychological conflicts, but where our whole mind-body matrix, if you want to call it that, kind of gets impacted by any number of things, and out of that flows more of an impact on the lower 2 jurisdictions below that, the therapeutic regimen in medicine. So let me see, Allison, if I have a button to make you full screen here, just to show you. I know I have that somewhere, but let me. Don't remember exactly how to do it now. That's me, but we want Allison. Oops.
Yeah, I can get it pretty close here.
Yeah.
Yeah, so all this to say, the details don't really matter except for the practitioners who are wielding this. But just to say that exactly what Jeff is saying is that we have 3 full jurisdictions. This is the naturopathic, and this is what people say, oh, you guys are like a one-stop shop. Then this second beacon row here is all the medicine proper. So the law of nature, like cures like, laws of opposites are more in this jurisdiction. And then we're helping people not reinfect by going after beliefs that have actually started their path into chronic disease as well. So we don't want the person, to actually use the beliefs to reinfect. So those 3 jurisdictions, counseling, medicine, and naturopathy, people always say, oh, that's great. Then I'm not going to need all these supplements or go to see the naturopath anymore. You seem to have it all covered. Well, honey, your sound.
Yep, I muted myself just in case the dog orchestra started up. Okay, so I was just saying, yeah, 3 jurisdictions. Allison, thank you for your expansion on that. Now, here is such, I sort of alluded to this a moment ago, but this is such a foundational question. Really, any form of healthcare needs to come to an understanding of this. As I sort of alluded to, also, modern medicine, Western medicine, even a lot of the naturopathic medicine, they are not sitting on any clear definition, of this word disease. Yes, there's any number of modalities and techniques, and making people feel better, helping symptoms to heal, and there's so many good things out there. I'm not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, but we end up with such a limitation where both what we just talked about a minute ago, without a clarity of those 3 jurisdictions. If I ran the world, that old saying, that would be mandatory for every, in every school of healthcare, every school of medicine, from Western, surgeons, all the way down to, all the natural modalities and everything else in between. But yeah, without the 3 jurisdictions and without this, what is disease? And let me say, again, we can kind of do an advanced PhD version of this definition, but let me try to make it a little more kind of everyday kind of language. In Hahnemann's system, in his whole concept of Heilkunst, a disease is a very specific impingement on our whole life energy, right? It's not like people just throw that word around. It kind of becomes an abstraction, but it was not an abstraction to Hahnemann. It was, as I say, it was this very concrete, specific impingement on our life energy. And it's, another phrase or another language we can use to talk about it. It's almost literally, or not almost, it actually is literally an impingement of one living entity on another. Like the disease entity is literally kind of penetrating or impregnating into the human living energy system. So that's not abstract. That's a very real statement. That's a very real phenomenon that's happening in disease.
And it's not a dis-ease. Like once you have studied Heilkunst, you will never use that term again, where you see alternative therapists or even allopaths use dis and then a hyphen ease, because it's not an imbalance in the life force. As Jeff is saying, it's actually like an impregnation.
Yes.
So when you are pregnant, it's very difficult to become unpregnant. And yes, unless so you can't just take vitamin C, for example, or start running a couple miles a day and expect to become unpregnant.
Yeah, the perfect example. And another way of also augmenting that idea is that, going back into Hahnemann's language, he, I won't go deep into this, but just to make this big distinction, and you're drawing this out, Alison, the distinction between diet versus what's happening more in this, penetrative aspect of ourselves. Hahnemann distinguished between like I've been using the word life power or life energy, these kinds of things. This is one of the great things he did in his genius, is he made this grand distinction between the sustaining part of our life energy, our living power, versus the generative part of our living power. So with the example you just gave, Allison, making a baby is not a substantive thing. You can't just drink one glass of orange juice and a bag of peanuts or something, and then you wake up pregnant. Like, you can't just change your diet and become pregnant. But yeah, you need to do this generative activity to to bring in this this kind of new life. So yeah, that generative aspect of the human being is very positive. It brings new life, new babies into our world, all these great things, new thoughts. The fact that we can think a brand new thought is a generative act. So anyways, I don't want to go too much deeper into that, but just laying out that distinction. When we are in Hahnemann's system curing disease, we are very specifically and very concretely kind of curing this thing that has penetrated into the generative power. So you cannot, and actually I have a slide coming up in a moment, showing that and as Allison has said, you cannot cure a pregnancy by changing your diet. You cannot cure a disease by changing your diet or doing more exercise or something like that. So anyways, this definition of disease is concrete, it's specific, it's real. We see this day in and day out, treating patients and giving them remedies. We see the direct effects once you put this concept in place and treat accordingly. Yeah, you will never go back, as Allison said, to the putting a hyphen between dis and ease. That completely invalidates this actual concrete definition of disease. Jill, I just want to kind of get a little bit of a check-in with you. Is this kind of making sense to you, like at your level, how you've engaged with Heilkunst, or any kind of question marks that are hanging over your head now? Or
I guess the question, it's sounding like disease is something, an outer force coming in. Is that?
Yeah,
is that
yeah, exactly. Yeah, the outer is a good word to add in there, because yeah, back to the dis-ease with the hyphen in it, that just implies that, oh yeah, I imbalanced myself. I ate too many potato chips this month or something, I'm a little bit out of balance. That's kind of an internal thing in terms of imbalancing yourself. But no, you're right, that outer force is a perfect phrase to throw in here as well.
And the other question I had was, in the first slide, there's the 3 parts, and do they all play a role in a particular disease?
Well, they can all. It's a kind of a dynamic three-way conversation or something. The way I had put it a couple of minutes ago was that the chronic miasms distinctly fit into that middle disease jurisdiction, but the treatment of that, the cure of that disease, the use of the homeopathic remedy will be more or less influenced by those other 2 jurisdictions, depending on what's going on for that person. So, Allison has her, actually it's my favorite chart as well, but I know she likes referring to it. Yeah. Let me go back here.
So I had a discovery. So I'm not saying anything that's client privilege information, but I had a patient very recently who suffers really significant prostate issues. And normally he would qualify himself very much for the allopathic approach. He wants to get surgery done, but surgery, as you know, because of this whole thing that's been going on for 2 years, can be 6 to 18 months out. He's in a lot of pain. So I'm his last resource right now. And so right away, I discover he's an O blood type. He's been drinking a lot of juice and eating a lot of sugar, and he's taking some prunes to help with issues of constipation. And I'm like, oh my God, these are so inflammatory foods that he's engaged with. And so, yes, the genetic miasm is at play for this individual. That's how they contracted the disease matrix, which is throwing off symptoms, which is that he's up several times a night, sometimes 24 times, because he can't pass significant urine. Well, yes, diet in this case is a nightmare because it's provoking more and more systemic insulin resistance and inflammation in his body. So yes, that's why we use all of those jurisdictions is to address cases on multi-levels. Also, too, I have to go around the belief pattern as to how he got himself in that mess in the first place. And then I'm also thinking, well, prostate is an organ of anger related to the male sexuality. That's the third jurisdiction for around the state of mind. And that's where the counseling comes in.
Okay. So let me just move ahead here. Yeah, so we have our base definition of disease, and then I won't go deep into this, but just to kind of illustrate within that, that master concept of disease, we identify different sub-jurisdictions. So we have, geopathic disease, homogenic disease, pathogenic, which is where the chronic miasms fit, iatrogenic, people who have side effects because of drugs, ideogenic, that's getting into disease that's caused by a false perception or delusions that we have about the nature of ourselves and the nature of the world. So that's ideogenic. But anyways, this is a whole lecture all on one slide here. But I just wanted to give you a bit of a context that the pathogenic are the home base of the disease jurisdiction of the chronic miasms. And actually, we'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. But yeah, this is our first clue here that what Hahnemann came to in his discoveries is that disease is basically another form of infection. Coming now through the genetic stream, but yeah, it comes back to that category of pathogenesis. Yeah. So that's kind of very interesting on its own. Yeah.
Yes, well said. Paul wants to know if this recording is going to be available later. So I just want to assure him that absolutely it will be. It will be available on our website after this. And I love the way Lisa says, this is so well put. It's as though the disease is living its life through the hostage host. Mm-hmm. That's so well versed. And it's exactly like a possession. And in fact, when we were doing clinical, remember we had to watch like The Exorcist and horrible movies. And, what was it? Something Time Photo. That was a great movie as well.
Oh, yeah. 1 hour photo.
1 hour photo. And yeah, it was all these movies were about people that were possessed by the disease matrices that they were suffering. And yeah, it's not a pretty picture. That's why I generally need time off between serving patients because yeah, it's hard work getting to the root causes of those gnarly beasts.
Yes, thank you. And also I will add, like that word hostage is great in our context here. It's not a pretty word, if there's a hostage situation, that's not fun for somebody. And likewise, when we're talking about disease and this kind of possession and all these things, like Hahnemann himself too will use like war metaphors or analogies of we need to cure a disease is to kill a disease. It's an enemy. Yeah. It's an enemy that's kind of infiltrated our boundaries or what have you. So yeah, hostage, war, killing. I know we're supposed to be all sweet, gentle people in the natural health field that just have rainbows coming out of our bums and everything. But no, disease
unicorns
is
out of our
a big deal. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we ride the unicorn to work. And, we again not be because we like to being crass or whatever, but yeah, that we do have to up our language in a sense when we're talking about this true nature of disease, the effect it has on the human being. And yeah, it is a hostage situation. It's a war situation. It's all these ugly things for sure. Mm-hmm. Okay, so now we know disease, we know a bit about the jurisdictions, especially the pathogenic. So what is a chronic miasm? So I've already given a hint as far as being related to now a genetic form of what was originally an infection, pathogenic. And going for a moment into some history here. So we're going to get a little bit Greek for a second. Me, I actually, we'll get to some German words down the line here, but yeah, we need to draw on other languages, which is actually quite important or significant to understand. The whole history of medicine and all the phases that the long history of human medicine has gone through. It's gone through different countries and languages, in its historical development. So, anyways, quick little aside. another big topic. But Hahnemann, he was actually a great linguist. He spoke and translated many languages, which I
12.
think, yeah, that's a lot. I'm trying to learn my second right now, and yeah, that's quite a feat. So yeah, so 12 languages. Hats off to him. But yeah, just to say, he had this great linguistic consciousness, this great historical consciousness. I think he was uniquely qualified to kind of come to discover the chronic miasms and really bring out this scientific understanding of what we're going to do about them. So, anyways, sorry for that little side there, but the miasma, a Greek word, is, I'll just read the slide here, a contagious power that has an independent life of its own, a pollution or bad air. Originally, this is me speaking now, this originally had more of a spiritual than a material connotation. So we will talk about germs now in our modern context, but that's just kind of an offshoot of this older concept of miasma. So the miasma theory, again, in our more recent history, coming up to around the 18th, 19th century, was now kind of something that was about to morph into the germ theory. It was this idea of contagion, but again, before our more material modern germ theory, we had this more idea of something in the air. And again, that's not even something material in the air, like a germ in the air, but just something. We still use that expression, something's in the air. There's a feeling in the air. There's a feeling in society these days that people are just fed up or something like that. We have these feelings in the air, along those lines. That's a little bit closer to the pre-material definition of miasma, right?
Yeah, thoughts of like when they use the four humors to diagnose or describe person's character, choleric or sanguine, or kind of take your consciousness back to that time. Bloodletting, cupping, and leaching was the main modalities at that time. So the idea was that it was something real that needed to be expunged, like what do priests do when somebody's possessed, honey? Exorcism.
Yes, an exorcism. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, so now here's a very brief history of Hahnemann. I've already alluded to a piece of this. He began his medical practice, treating what were commonly called acute miasms, just basically all the infections going around, scarlet fever and
Cholera.
And this was kind of the day in and day out bread and butter of doctors still now today. Everyone runs to their doctor for every little sniffle and every little cold and infection. And anyways, these are acute miasms, so they're pathogenic. They're what we would call germs today, but they're infectious. In the broader concept there. And these are what Hahnemann called constant Vasen diseases. Oh, there I go. I got my German word in there. So the Vasens are, back to our concept of disease, and we're talking about this disease entity penetrating. Hahnemann's German, he was talking about, a disease Vasen. A disease entity is penetrating the human Vasen. The human entity. So that's this. He did not go into this deep material definition. He was kind of in this bridge world between the old miasms of being these kind of things in the air, and to this emerging new world of the germ theory as a very physical theory. He was kind of properly bridging the two, and that, as I say, properly, because the human being is both, right? We're not one or the other. That's one of the great philosophical errors people make in general, or people make in medical systems. They go off to one side or the other, but Hahnemann properly bridged that. And anyways, his word Vasen, his German word, was the way he was using it, was this proper bridge between the more ethereal or the spiritual and the material. So he had these constant Vasen diseases, scarlet fever and cholera and all these
chicken
things.
pox is not going to look like measles.
Exactly. Yeah. Once you know your best friend, even when they're wearing a Halloween costume, you still recognize them walking down the hall, right? The way they walk and all these things, right? So, yeah. So once you know chicken pox, once you know measles, you're not going to mix them up. You're not going to mix up your friend Fred for your friend Steve or whatever. Like, once you know someone, you know them, right? Once you know a constant Vasen disease, you know it. The variable diseases, again, this is the great thing that Hahnemann spent most of his life on. Was okay, now that we can identify these specific constant Vasen diseases, well, how do we treat them with this new method of homeopathy? And as I say, he spent much of his many of his years, his writings, his books, really showing his fellow physicians how do you treat the symptoms that come off of chickenpox. It may be a constant phase in chickenpox as chickenpox, but the way an individual expresses symptoms to that will be very unique to their, that moment of that person's life and they're expressing the disease. And that's where Hahnemann showed how do you match a homeopathic remedy to treat their unique expression. So we're getting a little progression in Hahnemann here from the acute miasms, in their pure form, to the variable diseases in their their individual expression, and then finally this critical last phase of his life, the last 12 plus years, is where he had this great genial insight into the chronic miasms. So now he went from acute miasms through most of his medical career to these chronic miasms. So now, as I have already said, they are originally infections, but now they've become these genetic entities that get passed down through the family tree. And he spent a good 12 years deeply studying his patients and what were these chronic miasms, what seemed to be the issue of symptoms returning, symptoms not getting resolved, like as they were. Like the variable disease treatment was brilliant. He was actually a very famous doctor in Europe, and people were flocking to see him, and he was having all these successes through his variable disease treatment method, what we strictly call homeopathic treatment. I'm not going to go into the technicalities of all these words, but just so you understand, we're talking about he's in these individual diseases at this point, but then he comes back around full circle to the constant Bayesian diseases at the end of his life, and this is truly one of the great medical discoveries of the last at least 1,000 to 2,000 years that he can bring this forward at this point in history. So, and as I say, I won't go into all the technical pieces of that, but just so you understand a little bit of the progression of Hahnemann's life and his own development as a doctor, from constant diseases out to the variable diseases or the individual, and then coming full circle again to these constant diseases, these chronic miasms. So that's
a lot of people don't know that Hahnemann actually coined the term allopathic. And
right.
allopathic medicine got cemented into variable diseases and have not poked their head or snorkel up since. That's it.
Exactly. Yeah, and I've sort of alluded to this idea earlier, but I'll spell it out here. This is going back to the idea of the three jurisdictions. Chronic miasm being in the second jurisdiction of disease. So yeah, you can't. Another way I could have titled this is you can't cure something in the second jurisdiction by using a modality from the first jurisdiction, right? You can't cure chronic miasm with a balanced diet, exercise, vitamin supplements, so on and so forth. You're in two different jurisdictions there, so you can't breach that wall basically and reach from one jurisdiction into another. It doesn't work, and that's people constantly make those health mistakes for themselves. Doctors make those mistakes, naturopaths make those mistakes, just because they don't have the concept of the three jurisdictions. So I see it all the time. I did it myself, before I was educated in all this. You run from one modality to another. I'm going to try this, I'm going to try that, I'm going to try this. But a better way to start is, starting in your jurisdiction, thinking, is this a problem coming from the first jurisdiction, the second, or the third? And then you move your diagnosis from there. You don't have a chance of a proper diagnosis until you situate yourself in the jurisdiction. Sorry, I should have made your screen bigger there.
No, it's all good. I'm just your Vanna White, honey.
Thank you, Vanna. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, and again, this is sort of a continuing on that same idea. We have, this is, we often refer to Heilkunst in some of its original formation was called sequential therapy or timeline therapy, but the sequence is kind of coming off of what I'm just saying. There is a logical sequence to how you do things. So regimen is usually, the first logical starting point. Most people are relatively healthy with their diet, but there's a lot of improvement opportunities. The more you get that in order, the more it becomes logical and necessary to start going through the timeline. The timeline is part of the second jurisdiction, and what we mean here by timeline is the what we call the timeline of shocks and traumas. Someone has had history of, I'm going to make your screen bigger there. They've had history of broken bones, surgeries, heartbreaks, emotional traumas, all these kinds of things. And that's what we mean by the timeline in this case. So, as I said, those are part of the second jurisdiction. Those are actual disease issues. Somebody has any of the things that we're talking about here as traumas, those effectively become actual diseases that penetrate into the person's life force and now need that, those homeopathic modalities in the second jurisdiction to properly cure what has become lodged into the life force of the person. So yeah, very different from an imbalance in the first jurisdiction where you just need to clean up your diet, and before you know it, you're back to feeling good again. But no, these are actual diseases that have penetrated into the person's life force in this second jurisdiction concept we have here.
Okay, you can make me small again.
Okay. Oh yeah. So, and just to finish up the idea here. So yeah, from regimen, first jurisdiction, timeline, second jurisdiction, chronic miasms, also second jurisdiction, and then finally we get into the ultimate disease jurisdiction. Beyond the the first and second, we get into that third jurisdiction, and now we get into here we go Greek again, chthonic and ideogenic. So yeah, that's very, very simple, brief definition. We get into the deepest diseases, the deepest fear states, and we get into the highest diseases, the highest spiritual blockages, psychological blockages, mind-body blockages. So that's where we start getting taken into the third jurisdiction. Yeah. Okay. So let me move on. Yeah, a quick little footnote here. In modern history, I keep talking about Hahnemann, in the 18th and 19th century, and him going through all of these discoveries. In more recent years, like about a few decades ago, anyways, I think this was in the mid to late 70s, this French Dr. Jean Elmiguer, he put out this book. Actually, he put it out in French. This is the English translation, and he started to consolidate through his clinical work. He basically verified everything Hahnemann did and discovered, but now he kind of verified it in a more modern clinical context and kind of put on track what we just said about the sequence of the timeline, your shocks and traumas, the sequence of the miasms. So he kind of really formulated and formalized a lot of what Hahnemann had laid down in terms of the deeper philosophical structure and how Hahnemann was going about that. At his original clinical approach to it, we started to get more of a clear formation of that in our modern clinical sense with Dr. Elmiguer. Okay, so now we're actually going to get into the core of the miasms themselves. We're actually going to be talking turkey now, or talking shop, like what are the symptoms, what do each of these miasms look like, how do you recognize it in your own health history, your family health history, things like that. And yeah, and we, as we can see here, they are, we have 8 chronic miasms. Those are based on the 4 seasons of the year, 2 per season. And of each of those, and each of the seasons of the year, no matter where you live in the world, you even if you live in a place without snow or without certain weather conditions or whatever, we all, just because of human nature, we all speak through these deeper archetypes, these kind of psychological or spiritual archetypes of what's within each human being, and how that's just kind of outwardly manifested in these 4 seasons of the year. As I say, those are going to be different in different places of the planet, but the fundamental archetype is always the same. It's even if, as I say, you don't have snow, we have this archetype of contraction at that winter season, for example, and that will play out as we talk about each of these 8 chronic miasm diseases. We'll be referring back to these 4 seasons and what are the basic qualities we see in each of those diseases. Yeah, as I just said, yeah, we have the 4 seasons. Each of them has 2 of the miasms. That makes for a total of 8. And the 2 per season kind of comes to another part of basic human physiology. Again, this is another humongous topic. I am just going to very briefly mention it here, and that is our whole physiology is based on, like when we talk about the human being or a human being, what we really need to understand behind that grammar is each one of us is actually a double being. So, the 3 of us on screen here, myself, Allison, and Jill, apparently 3 human beings, there's actually 6 beings that are participating directly, on screen together here. So same, if you're in a marriage, I talk about this all the time with my patients. One person and their spouse seems like you're talking about 2 people. No, you're talking about 4 beings. There's a dance between, like a contra dance. If you've ever been to an old-fashioned contra dance, the way the 2 couples dance with each other, that is literally the physiology going on in a marriage. So anyways, that is a huge topic that I will put to rest right there for now. But just so we understand, there is a physiological origin to why do we have 8 chronic miasms. Another general pattern is, as we go through all the 4 seasons, we go through the 8 chronic miasms. We start with psora, we end with Lyme, and as a general pattern, the psora is the most superficial disease. It's all out on the skin. People with dry skin, eczema, skin rashes, other mild, lung reactants and things like that. You go through all 8 and all the way down, you get to the deepest disease, which is the Lyme miasm, and that one is deep in the bones, deep in the psychology of the person. It's we'll get to that in a moment when we get into the details, but you'll see some of the deepest symptoms come in that Lyme miasm. Okay, one more general pattern too. Speaking of our physiology, we have another huge topic that I am going to make so short. So sorry if it's a teaser for you, but this is just a necessary background. The basics of human physiology work through 4 bodies. We don't just have our physical mineral body. We also have an etheric body, which is governs all of our life functions, from sleep and digestion to all the hormones, all the things that kind of govern our livingness, our living functions. The third body is the astral, that gets into you can say the desires, the aversions. Somebody has a strong desire, to eat these kinds of foods, and they hate those kinds of foods. Or people, they love spending time with these people they love over here, and they have a strong aversion for these people over here. Like that's coming from our astral body. And finally, the uniquely human one, like all the ones I've just said, exist out in the kingdoms of nature, in the mineral kingdom, and the plant kingdom, and the animal kingdom. But now you get up to the ontic organization, and that is the part of human physiology that you don't find in the plants, the minerals, or the animals. That's uniquely human. And again, as I say, huge topic. I am giving you the very, very small fortune cookie version of it, but there you have it. And I'm sorry, and the reason I did bring it up all like that, when we talk about how long does it take to go through all the miasms for a patient and cure all of them, all 8 of the miasms down through all 4 of the bodies, this is where we get kind of this some patients needing to go up to and including a second, a third, a fourth round of the miasms, completing it all the way through, because of where those miasms are lodged in that person. Are they lodged mainly in their physical body, or also in their etheric, their astral, their ontic? Is it all the way up? Is it creating kind of this multifaceted disease matrix within that person's physiology, which may necessitate going through kind of all 4 of the rounds of miasm. So anyways, that's a rough framework around that. And here is again, if we want to do fortune cookies, if we had to end this in 30 seconds, this is maybe where how we would do it. We would just give one word for each miasm. Psora, I call deficient or deficiency. Malaria, deplete. Tuberculinum, dissatisfied. Ringworm, stymied. Metaurinum is inflated. Carcinosin is resigned. Syphilinum is cursed. And Lyme is isolated. Okay, so we're done for the day. Thank you for coming. No, we're going to go into each one now. But yeah, I just did a little mental exercise for myself to see, could I find one word? Now, of course, there are other words we could swap in and out to replace these. But yeah, this was kind of a fun little mental exercise to seeing how how we could condense it down into one word.
I love this. I've never seen this before.
No, I just invented it a
love
couple
that
of
you
days
did
ago.
this.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pure genius. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
What's that classic song, Bewitched, Bothered, and Bewildered? Yeah, that was a bit of my inspiration for, yeah, what are the words of the miasms?
Yeah, no, I love that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so now we start with the autumn. That's where the miasms start. And yeah, as we have our two per season, we will talk about Sora, we will talk about malaria. So let's just, I'm going to do a little bit of a flyby through this, Allison, if you want to kind of jump in, you throw in little case examples of certain symptoms in the miasms, patients and things like that. So starting with Sora, and as you can see in these pictures, very, very dry skin. That person looks like a desert. Their face is a desert kind of thing. Yeah, dry, lack of assimilation. They, even if we see this, someone may drink a lot of water in their lifestyle, but because of this Sora miasm, they have all these dryness symptoms. It's like, to common sense, that doesn't make sense. It's like, well, but you're drinking enough water, and your lifestyle is good and everything. But no, they have this deep Sora miasm, and it's dry.
Yeah, oldest miasm on the planet. So just to know that it's been around for thousands of years. It's the root for scabies. It's also the root for leprosy. And these people feel a lack. I can't be with my tribe. At biblical times, you couldn't actually be a goddess or high priestess or high priest at that time because you were considered unclean. So a lot of people with Sora have been prescribed what? What does a doctor prescribe all the time? They don't have very many medicines. They're not very inventive. So they give cortisone cream.
I know.
Yeah, I know you know. Yeah. So the cortisone cream, of course, suppresses and pushes it back into the more noble organs, and then the person next fall can't breathe. And they wonder why they need a puffer, right? And then the third fall, they go back and the doctor says, no problem. I know you still have to take the drugs for your skin and the puffer for your breathing issues, but now you have seasonal affective disorder. Let's send you off to the feelings doctor and get you on some prednisone. So all you've done is you've driven it from the least noble organs into the more noble organs, right? So skin, then lungs, then the feeling body, then mind, right? In Heilkunst, the direction of cure is from the inside out. So that's why when we're curing disease, often people go, oh my God, I'm itchy like a son of a gun. What the hell's going on? We're like, yes, good. That means the organs are actually working well.
Yeah, we seem like we're sadistic or something, but no, we are enthusiastic for a good reason there. Yeah. Okay, so yes, here we are. So Sora, yes, the Sora state of mind. They feel like there's just in one way or many ways their life is just lacking. Don't have enough money, don't have enough time. Nobody loves me. I'm going to be driven into poverty. I'm going to spend my senior years in the poorhouse, or whatever the equivalent is, on the streets, right? Great anxiety, like on this front, like always concerned and worried of where are things going, and am I going to make it to this goal, and am I going to have what I need, and like it's a very distinct kind of anxiety.
Remember, you went into Sora one year and you had a small pencil and you went to write and the lead broke and you said, effing Sora.
Yeah, you didn't have enough lead in my pencil. Yeah. Right. Yeah, forsaken, actually, I have here, and another word I didn't put here is abandoned. Forsaken, abandoned is a deep emotion. And it may not even be conscious, but people kind of, when they have these deep miasms, they kind of live through their life. Kind of like the script of their life has kind of been written by these deep emotions, in many cases, and they haven't yet got to the point where they kind of have some reason that they kind of have an awareness of that. It hasn't come up in their conscious mind. They just kind of unfold their life according to those emotions, and even the physiological part of it. As I said, someone drinking a lot of water, but their cells have a state of mind that they're like, well, life doesn't love me, nobody loves me, I don't see any water, I'm not taking any water. Like it's there all around them. Water is all around them, love is all around us, these kinds of things. But with that deeper emotion or state of mind, we don't even see what's right in front of our noses, right? So
they have absorption issues.
Exactly, absorption issues, love issues, relationship issues. However it comes out, it's like they can't seem to get any fulfillment of the things they seem to want and need in their life. Okay, so I keep using the word dry. Here it is again. Functional disturbances run throughout Sora, deficiencies, lack of energy, hypo. Of course, we have the other medical word, which is hyper. We'll come to that in a later
Yeah,
miasm.
they can't get warm. Their hands and feet are freezing. They have all kinds of issues with creating heat.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah, and that's super interesting because yeah, humans like mammals, we generate heat. We are little little thermoses, right? We're or furnaces rather. We are generating. We have this. We're not like reptiles who are kind of this cold-blooded temperature of their environment. No, we have this capacity to back to our generative power. We generate our own heat. We generate our own kind of living functions and everything. We don't just sit like a simple cell or whatever, wait to suck everything in from the environment, but we can actually create that for ourselves. Okay, artistic portrayals. Of course, the Great Fall, right? That's a very very big story in Western culture. The fall from the Garden of Eden, the fall from grace. But yeah, this is the physiology of Sora. We've kind of, as I said a moment ago, we've fallen away from this great abundance of what actually is available for our health and our great a great abundance in our minds and our physiology, and it's always available, but we've kind of fallen. I'll keep using
Yeah,
that word.
the tree of life is not available to you. And if
Right.
you are just offspring off someone's rib, like you don't get to have the full Monty of, I mean, we've had this couched in us from the onset as humans that, yeah, and which is, we're kind of living out spiritually right now.
Mhm. Yeah. Sora, so medical conditions, we've talked about this, skin issues, with fall allergies, the hay fever, that goes back to my story I opened this with earlier on, poor assimilation, headaches, so we've touched on all that. Some of the early warning signs for Sora: pessimistic attitude towards life, minor skin issues, signs of malnutrition despite eating well, anxiety conditions, insomnia, frequent colds or coughs, especially in the fall. Okay, now we're on to the next miasm, malaria. And there is our friendly mosquito. Um, and depending on where you live, you have more or less mosquitoes around you at certain time of the year. But specific to the miasm, it's interesting because that's the genetic and the origin of where malaria came from. We even today still in some parts of the world, where malaria is still quite prevalent as an infection, it's transmitted by mosquitoes, right? So that's kind of how the mosquito got to star on that slide there. But it also takes us into the state of mind of malaria. If you think of what your emotion is, how you react to mosquitoes, if they're swarming around you or biting you and all these things, they're very irritating. They're very, it's basically it's a deep state of victimization, right?
Mhm.
If you've been around a mosquito lately, you'll remember that, or even 10 years ago, you can't forget it. But so that there's our malaria mosquito. So
In
yeah,
the
here.
tent late at night.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and even if you've zipped up all the sleeping bag and everything else, they
It's
still
like,
somehow
where
get
is the
in.
damn thing? It's in my ears. I know.
Right. So yeah, they feel picked on, victimized, sensitive, touchy, morose, irritable. Yeah. So that we've all kind of, as I say, whether we felt this from mosquitoes or some other irritation in our life, it can kind of have this malarial quality to it. Um, so the essential characteristics: more extreme form of Sora, depleted, exhausted, dehydrated, weakness, collapse. So yeah, Sora has that to one degree, but now malaria has it to an even further degree. So there's kind of here's where we start to see the continuity from one miasm to the next, and how.
I often liken it to the first stages of pregnancy.
Mhm.
Again, it's just this feeling. Women will know this if they suffered any kind of like nausea in the first trimester, and they're tired. They're kind of fed up, and the feeling is just like, oh my god, I just want my bed. Um, Often there's diarrhea and chronic nausea associated with malaria, and just this feeling like, you know what, just take me now. I'm kind of done. I don't really have anything left. There's no,
Mhm.
you know, life force in my bones. I'm just, yeah, it's exhausted.
Medical condition: recurrent fevers, general fatigue conditions, irritable bowel syndrome. Because we start to go out from the skin and the lungs and sora. We start to get a little bit now touching into the digestive organs. So that's where this miasm begins. That we'll see it more as we go into the next ones. Early warning signs of malaria: irritability, fatigue, feeling negative, somewhat depressed, some fevers and behavioral problems in children. Okay, and now we make it to winter. So we'll have two miasms here, the tuberculosis and the ringworm. And yeah, here's some pictures of tuberculosis, a nice lung X-ray, and oh yeah, here's a picture of going way up into the mountains. That is such a medical, historical, cultural image behind tuberculosis, because in the 18th, 19th century, when tuberculosis was kind of in its peak as far as human history goes, that's all the sanatoriums were way up in the mountains. Tubercular patients would feel better way up in the mountains. So there's a physical, geographical history behind that, but there's also kind of a symbolic meaning to that. Like tuberculosis kind of wants to escape out of the mundane details of everyday life. They want to go off into the higher realms. Kind of out of the cities, and actually that's where tuberculosis was peaking in human history. The beginning of the industrial age and factories, all these dark, grimy cities now. So yeah, like this part of this tubercular disease was born out of this desire to escape from the trappings of modern life, the dirty cities and everything like that. State of mind of tuberculosis: they're deeply romantic, deep longing, deeply idealistic kind of a state of mind, deeply restless as well. And I sort of said that in another way. Can we not just escape this dirty city and just go camping, go up into the mountains somewhere, get into clean air, right? With the restlessness, you can have a deep boredom. This is a fun word: capricious. People who so they're so restless, they're so bored, they don't even know what they want themselves. Like, I want this, I want, give me this food, give me that thing, give me, especially you see that in children. If they're teething or in pain, you kind of get that capricious state of mind. They don't even know what they want, so they demand things, and then you give it to them and they throw it away. So yeah, deeply, unfulfilled is another word I put here. The feeling of being trapped and wanting to run away and escape. They can be very vindictive or malicious, as far as an emotion. They only feel well when things are changing or in motion. So those are your friends, or maybe yourself sometimes, who they need to constantly be traveling, constantly in motion, constantly going from one place to another. And when they're in motion, when they're in transit, when they're on the train or in the airport or wherever, they feel great. They're about to be on the next adventure. They're going somewhere new. But as soon as they land somewhere and start to settle down, let's say they're staying somewhere for some period of time, that's when the tubercular restlessness will start to set in again. They don't want to sit still. So even if they're not traveling, some tubercular people will be like that in their day-to-day life. They're always looking for new, changing something in their life, rearranging the furniture in their house, changing their job, changing their romantic partner. It's like, yep, done with this one, I'm on to the next. It's like, and again, when it's time to make a change in life, it's time to make a change. But I'm talking here in the tuberculosis, it's so deep and pathological that it's just a neurotic compulsion. They can't stop from changing one thing and then the next and then the next. Okay, the medical conditions in tuberculosis are lung issues, asthma, bronchitis, lots of winter sicknesses, digestive issues, so it gets even deeper than the malaria into the digestive tract, teeth grinding, allergies, especially to milk or cats, ADHD. Again, we can have the whole talk about diagnosis, and ADHD isn't an actual diagnosis, it's a label, but it certainly is connected in our sense to what the deeper disease of tuberculosis drives in somebody. Frequent colds, sore throats, earaches.
Chronic constipation. How many cases have we been able to cure of chronic constipation?
Yeah, that's a big one, that's for sure. Yeah. And yeah, the early warning signs: fidgety, can't sit still, never satisfied, recurring chest colds, allergies, especially to cats or milk. Extreme expressions of tuberculosis, chronic lung conditions. You start getting into, you know, asthma and chronic bronchitis, pneumonia. They feel lost in life. They can't find their place. Actually, there's an expression. People will say this in various ways. Yeah, they may be a grown up and working at their 9 to 5 job, and they have a house. They have all the grown up things they're supposed to have, but they still they'll use the phrase, well, I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. It's like, well, aren't you grown up? Like, you're doing you look like a grown up on the outside, yeah, but on the inside they're just still searching. They don't even know, right? What am I meant to do? This job pays the bills, but it's not really satisfying. So yeah, that could be a deeply painful state of mind for sure. Okay, so now we will come into ringworm, but actually I am going to exit for a moment. I don't know if anyone wants, if Allison, you want to lead any points of what we've talked about so far, but anyways, I will be.
Okay. Fair enough. Jill, do you have any specific questions?
Are all of these in everyone?
That's a great question. Yes, to varying degrees. And we're going to get to that. It's one of the questions at the end of the presentation. So brilliant, because we all have them as functions of our human evolution. We kind of sign a contract before we're born for which ones we're going to have more predominating than others. We're not exactly sure why that is, but I hazard a guess, again, after almost 20 years, 21 years as a clinician, is that as a function of our evolution, it is a bit like the hero's journey. The moment we're born, we don't know what we were downloaded with, but our journey is to find out what are our challenges and what are our specific themes with relationship to those challenges, and to overcome them. When you watch somebody go through their genetic miasms, some will be more laden with cancer and some more sora. Well, why is that? The person brilliantly, over the 28-day cycle between their appointments, will actually come to these amazing revelations. And they'll actually tell you, you just have to listen really carefully, and they will tell you why they got downloaded with some more than others as challenging pieces for them to overcome. Every movie and every book is about the hero's journey. Every single one. And why is that baked in to our society? Why is that a norm? Why don't we watch movies about or read books of totally different nature? Because it is the plight of every human to unearth what they have evolutionarily signed an agreement with before they got here. And to find out, for example, the cancer state of mind is the unlived life or the disease of resignation. Why would somebody choose that unknowingly, subconsciously before they got here, and then choose a family matrix that's based on that archetype? We can only hazard a guess. Yep.
And so they're all downloaded in us. Are there so the mosquito
Yep.
passes it along, but is it just activating it, or is it
Yeah, I love this question.
passing it?
Yeah. And it can be that pathology begins as a result of an impetus like a tick bite or a mosquito. Another great question. In other cases, though, we're seeing it prevail more and more as a function of our collective human evolution. And the reason for that is that we have kind of individual karma, but we also have socio contracts that we've signed unknowingly just by our geography, the fact that we were born at this time, going through these particular challenges on a global level. also has miasmatic influence.
So it's got a physical aspect, but it's also got sort of like this collective consciousness genetic aspect as well.
Yeah, it's a physical contract we signed to overcome through our hero's journey those particular disease matrices, but we also have it collectively as a whole.
Okay, so I did hear this last part of what you were talking about. I didn't hear where you came from, but that's all good. Shall we go into ringworm, or do you want to?
No,
Yes, I didn't.
continue.
I couldn't
It's a
tell if you were
question
tied up.
that is going to come up again at the very
Yes.
end as well.
Yeah, we do have some questions already submitted. Yeah, that we've kind of put into the slides at the end too. Okay. Oh yeah, ringworm. And by the way, there's my very favorite, one of my very favorite all-time, what I call a Heilkunst movie, which is Groundhog Day, and of course it's a classic movie. It's a famous movie. Most people either have seen it or know about it, and it's as I say, a great artistic expression of the content of ringworm. You know, if it's a fair spoiler alert. It's what is this now, a 40-year-old movie or something? So yeah, that's we're past the statute of limitations on spoiler alerts here. But yeah, it's the plot. It's very simple, but he lives the same day literally the same day over and over and over and over again, Groundhog Day, and it's such an amazing artistic portrayal, of the ringworm. Not that the writers of that movie knew about Heilkunst or miasms or anything else. They were just doing what artists do. They express these deeper principles and archetypes of life. They just happen to tap into the most perfect ringworm expression. So yeah, this reliving the same day over and over and over again, and the frustration of that, the feeling trapped of that. So it's like the feeling trapped we said in tuberculosis, but now it gets even deeper in the ringworm. It's like trapped in the sense where there's no hope. It's like I'm trapped. Like in tuberculosis, they're trapped in a way that they're very restless and they're actively trying to break out of the trap. But ringworm, it's now gotten so deep, it starts turning more towards the direction of hopelessness. Right? It's kind of like a trap that there is no escape. There can be no escape from, and of course the emotion that goes along with being trapped in that way. Okay, so the state of mind in ringworm is we have a victimized feeling, but now we said that earlier for the malaria as well, but now it's an even deeper, more deeply rooted feeling of victimization. And even as I say here, bordering on persecution, you can have irritability and grouchiness, alternating struggle and indifference, feeling trapped, and endless seeking for an answer or escape. Close but no cigar. So that's a great expression to connect to the ringworm feeling. Yeah, essential characteristics. We have irritability, deep fatigue, difficult concentration, caught in a loop of struggle, and then resigned acceptance. So it's a loop that you never get out of. Success is just beyond the capacity to attain. Dreams of ever elusive destination. So again, you can see some of the carryover from tuberculosis, the longing for something else and the restlessness, but now it's more kind of a flattened energy state. It's more like it's less and less capable of acting on. Tuberculosis is very active. They're very restless, and there's a lot of activity in tuberculosis, but now that's starting to get back to what we said earlier too. We're getting deeper and deeper and deeper into pathology as we go through the miasms, and you're seeing this deepening even from tuberculosis to ringworm, where that that hope, the candle of hope, starts to get snuffed out in a sense. Yeah, and you've got your there's your diagram, Allison.
Just to give you the order again, so you know where we are on the map.
Yep. So yeah, we are coming now just to about the halfway point here as we hit the ringworm. Okay. Oh, there he is. I've talked all about the movie already, but there he is on the scene doing his reporting duty. So we'll leave Punxsutawney Phil where he is. Medical conditions in ringworm. The characteristic ring-shaped rash. Don't know. Maybe I should have made that bigger, but it's just like I say, it's a ring, a ring skin rash. and that's where it gets its name from. Oh, and by the way, ringworm has more to do with a ring than it has to do with a worm. There's no worm. People get grossed out if you say they have a worm, but a ring is just the shape of the rash.
Yeah, it doesn't always come up that way. It can be a coppery rash under the breasts, in the armpits, in the groin. Shows up a lot. Athlete's foot, that's itchy and kind of very raw, tender, and sore in cases.
Yes, seasonal affective disorder. Again, that's not a disease diagnosis. That's another false condition label. But we understand where we start working with that, and we largely will see a lot of root in the ringworm miasm in patients, and it can start to have more of a deeper state of fatigue. We've talked about tiredness and depletion in some of the early miasms, but now we start to touch into actual fatigue. Okay, and this brings us to one of the most exciting times of the year, spring. Everything's in blossom. The birds are flying around. The bees are buzzing. Speaking of the birds and the bees, we're going to talk about psychosis as a miasm in just a moment. We'll also get into the later spring, which is our cancer miasm. So those are the pair we're going to get into here. Yeah, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Roller coasters. Medically, we have heart conditions, blood pressure, high blood pressure, being overweight, lots of kind of conditions related to being overweight. Again, back to the blood pressure and the heart and all of these things. And some of and this picture here is really demonstrating some of the three-dimensional conditions of this psychotic miasm, warts. Other kind of growths like that, things out on the skin. So going back to the beginning, sore. Yes, we had a lot of skin stuff, but it was just the dryness, right? It's dry skin and eczema, like very flat skin conditions, basically. But the Metaurinum, which is the remedy for psychosis, we get more into these 3D developments and growths. Uterine fibroids. All of these where things are growing. Of course, this becomes the precursor for cancer. Like we'll see the continuity in a moment when we get into the cancer miasm. But yeah, these three-dimensional growths are really what we're talking about.
Yeah, lots of fibroids, very large. The doctor will say, "Oh, it's benign." It's massive growths. Patients with grapefruit-sized tumors, warts, ganglions, little bone. In kids born with pockets in the back of their head with teeth and hair in it is very much an indication of this particular genetic miasm. Corresponds with the spring. So what you see is a lot of growth. What happening right now? Well, all the leaves on the trees are about to burst forth, and the grass will need to be mowed every 2 days. And so this is the nature of psychosis: heart bursting, heart attacks, strokes, bursting, quick onset, fast happening diseases. So not like the slow diseases of syphilis that go on for 20, 30 years. Psychosis is it's now. The patient is in the hospital and it's all happening now.
Mm-hmm. And also, I missed a question. We had a question from Ringworm. Somebody asked, so it's not the tinea remedy. Actually, that's just a synonym. That's just a medical synonym. Ringworm, tinea, like these are just medical synonyms for the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think we've covered a lot of this on the psychosis, but I think actually I want to zero in on the phrase here, original sin. Like that, that's kind of a metaphor or a concept at one level. It's a spiritual concept. There's a certain reality there, but there is this real root in psychosis, in the state of mind, and then of course it comes out in the physical symptoms, which fuels the anxiety, fuels the guilt, fuels the behaviors. It's like this deep hidden, like almost like a hidden shameful part in someone, and they don't even understand that. If it has had nothing to do with their individual life, if it's kind of this genetic inheritance. So people don't understand why they have this bizarre drive. to the sex, drugs, and rock and roll, to solve their anxiety issues, whatever the case is with them. It's kind of, there's this deep root of this kind of original sin, as I'm saying, as if something is wrong with them. It's like there's something, there's something dirty or sinful, or there's something wrong with them, right? So anyways, that is such a psychological and a physical root behind so much of what we see in this miasm.
Remember when our daughter would, at dinner every year, she'd say, "Am I still too young to go to jail?"
Oh yeah.
Remember,
Yeah.
she always felt she had done something wrong. I said, "Sweetheart, you're not old enough, and certainly you've never done anything to qualify for such an action." But she would ask every year around March 21st, and it would just blow my mind that was kind of baked in.
Yeah. The seasons, they just keep going round and round every year, and there it is again. Yeah. Okay, essential characteristics of psychosis. Time, and you were just saying this a moment ago, Alison, time feels like it moves too slowly. And remember back in Sora, we talked about all the hypo conditions. Well, now in psychosis, we have the hyper conditions: hypertension, hyperactive, all the other medical names that have that hyper at the beginning. That's just telling you, we're in psychosis. Too much activity, too fast, too much growth, too much.
Yeah, they're
too much
frantic.
Yeah.
Yeah, they don't even know why they're cooking at 1,000,000 miles an hour or driving too fast, or everything's frantic. They're all sped up, even their speech, and they think all the time into the future. Well, we have to get that done, and here's the plan, and they don't really connect to the feeling in the present.
Yeah, that's a pretty broad societal feeling, isn't it?
Yeah, isn't it?
Artistic portrayals of the psychosis. Oh yeah, the lives and early deaths of certain rock stars, famously, the deaths of Elvis, Jim Morrison, Jimi Hendrix. Live fast and hard and die young. Again, the sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Where here's the rock and roll chapter of the equations. Well, not just rock and roll, but they had the sex and drugs too. So, that's we all have this living cultural memory of these individuals, and even more recent ones too. The same thing, but that's just psychosis through and through and through. Okay, medical conditions. We've touched on a number of these already just along the way here, but we have all the heart, everything heart, of course, goes back to that psychosis, the spring allergies. And here's an important one, this last point here: the more susceptible to vaccinosis. Again, another huge topic. We will come back around in future webinars to this, but we talk about parents who have these questions all the time about what they're doing with their children and the vaccine schedule, and if they don't want to follow that, or maybe they're trying to figure that out. We always will talk about the same principles and the same concepts about how we approach that, but very specifically, when we see this strong psychotic miasm in a given family, this child is coming, we can see the family tree behind them, we will extra emphasize the consideration to avoid vaccinations as much as possible with those children, because they're the ones who are most likely to have the bigger reactions to vaccines. So that they're kind of on the higher end of the susceptibility. Now, as I say, the same principle is true for all children, but we extra emphasize it here, is what I'm saying. But otherwise,
that's going to be taken down off the Facebook platform. Way to go, hon.
Uh-oh.
Is this called Metarinum as well?
The remedy is called Metarinum. The disease is psychosis. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, good question. Okay. So anyways,
and if anybody needs a bathroom break or anything before they get cystitis, please go ahead and then come back. We didn't expect this to go well. Yeah, we didn't expect it to go so long. So please don't hesitate. And
So now we know the real cause of psychosis. It came from a long webinar, but back a few millennia ago. Yeah. Okay. So the early warning signs, all kinds of growths. We've talked about that. Sharp ups and downs of energy or emotion. The classic bipolar conditions, manic depressive condition. intense passion and drive. Oh, these are passionate people. These are like, you know who we're talking about, those hyper passionate people who are, working on big projects in their life. Yeah, those are your Metarinum friends, or maybe it's you or part of your family as well. But Allison, yeah, you
I'm just
recognize that?
saying, oh yeah, a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, me too. Yeah, that's certainly. And then one more thing, we've talked about all the general patterns, the seasons and this and that. Um, as we go through this whole sequence of 8 we're going through, the more we come closer to the last ones, like, as we are here, the more and more these are big in our contemporary medical culture. Like this one, the next one, cancer, the syphilis, the Lyme that we're coming to next. These are so big in our modern life. Like, yeah, this one, the other ones, like these are everywhere in our lives, in our medical histories, what's going on in doctors' offices. Of course, the doctors don't know the miasms. They just, give out all their usual drug prescriptions. But once you see these miasms, and especially these latter 4 as we're in now, yeah, they're just ubiquitous. They are everywhere, everywhere, everywhere.
Yeah, I think that's what I really enjoy about working internationally. As like you say, you see these archetypes show up all over the world, no exception.
Yeah. Okay, extreme expressions of the psychosis: advanced heart conditions, manic depression, bored unless engaged in extreme activities such as extreme sports, taboo sexual activities, etc. This is such an important point, and we do kind of see a plague of boredom in a lot of modern life. Just people need all this constant stimulation of their social media feed on their phone. Everyone is wandering through their life, just scrolling, just this constant need for stimulation. Is because it's almost like a part of an addiction, right? Which what we can't even feel alive in the proper healthy sense unless we're feeling hyper alive. Like, what's that? There's actually there's a reference I just thought of, but I can't capture the name in my memory at the moment. Anyways, we'll let that go. But
yeah, pornography is part of this.
That is part of it. You're right, exactly, because that's where you get into this need for hyper stimulation, because the natural stimulation doesn't do it anymore, right? Anyway, so this is psychosis, and this is modern life in so many ways. Okay, and now, now we can all exhale, get all that fun partying out of our system, and now we're going to go down the other side of the chute into the cancer miasm. So we have, this deep emotion or state of mind of resignation. So we sort of started into that with ringworm. They kind of realize they're trapped, and they're barely fighting anymore. Now cancer, that gets even deeper. Like, it's this deep resignation to there's no hope, there's no point, there's I am just trapped deep in this energetic disease kind of matrix within myself. The unlived life is a phrase that comes up in various contexts. Like, people, they're going through the motions, but they're not actually fundamentally living. They're kind of a zombie or an empty shell kind of moving through the world. But there's, if you're trying to connect to someone, like, you start to sense that, oh yeah, there's no real life force in this empty shell I'm trying to talk to. Again, that's a little bit extreme, but it's very true. Like, that's this big driving force in the cancer. We get a perfectionism side that starts becoming more and more obvious. And it's all about pleasing others, right? Again, that empty shell I'm referring to, that whatever life energy is there, starts to become more and more about everyone else. Oh, I'm going to serve my family and my community. I'm going to make a better world, or for whatever. They kind of, again, they still have a bit of the passion of the psychosis, but now it's starting to get channeled into almost more of a perfectionist kind of trying to remake the world, in a sense. But again, it's never for themselves individually. They don't have that interconnection anymore. Their whole MO, their modus operandi, becomes about, I'm going to go fix and save the world around me. Well, that's a great, nothing wrong with contributing to life and your community and your family and everything, but I'm talking about a very pathological state here, where it's the inner self is virtually gone, and there's basically this pathological expression of, I'm going to make the world perfect, which is a very sick drive once you really understand how that works. Now there is, back to the psychotic miasm, there's also another question we just went past here. So OCD is in the psychotic miasm. It's partially in psychosis, and it's partially linked in the syphilis, which we're coming to in a minute. So yeah, any kind of ritualistic OCD patterns is on the syphilitic side, but some of the more just kind of you can say the overly passionate behaviors, the overly passionate way of needing to do certain things, that can be related to the psychosis. So yeah, there's a bit of a bridge there between the two miasms.
Just want to say with martyrdom, they're looking for a savior. Carcinosin or cancer secretly wants somebody to come in and put them on their fine white steed and get them off to some castle in the clouds. Their motivation for rescuing you often is that they secretly hope that eventually you'll do the same. But they're postured pathologically in that state, and they eventually will break apart when they realize that there is no savior forthcoming. So they usually follow, like, religiously CNN, the news, politicians, somebody in the community, Elon Musk, like somebody's going to save them, right? And they're waiting for that moment. And they have lost that innate responsibility that their own ontic organization and individuality actually is the recipe for solving the puzzle.
Yep, perfect examples. So yeah, what are our essential characteristics in cancer? We have an oversensitivity, either emotionally or in the immune system, deep suppression of emotions, contraction or shrinking of life energy. Shrinking is a huge word. I'll just leave it at one word, but again, this is one of these other ones that becomes a whole lecture series just around one word. History of suppressed fever or its absence, history of early childhood responsibility, such as if a parent has died and usually the older child kind of takes on that parenting function as a substitute, for example. Medical conditions in cancer, of course, cancer, as we use that word in general medical context, a cancerous tumor, a cancerous cyst, a cancerous growth, the physical form of cancer. But then we also get into a lot of functional earlier sides of cancer, the migraines, the insomnia, burnout, diabetes, constipation, chronic fatigue syndrome. So these are all the much early, like before you even have a tumor, we have years or decades of a lot more functional issues.
Thyroid is another one.
Yeah, that's a big one. Yeah. The early warning signs of cancer: some moles, some twitches of the eyelids, excessive politeness or sweetness if you're looking at the character of a person, strong cravings for chocolate, frequent sighing, insomnia, lack of forward motion in life. So yeah, these are some general patterns you'll start to pick up on. And extreme expressions, yeah, I sort of alluded to this earlier. The lights are on, but no one's home. An extreme vanishing of the self and identity, and then we, of course, physically, the late stages of cancer, second, third, fourth stages of physical cancer. Okay, and now we come to the summer.
We're at an hour and a half, Hein?
I do, and that is why I'm talking as fast as I am. So syphilis, canker sores, the depression, like even suicidalness. It's a movie I can talk a lot about. I won't do it right here, but the Joker in that Heath Ledger played was a super expression of syphilis. We actually have a blog post we wrote about that. I'll dig it up and I'll add it to the links after we're done this today. We have deformities, of course, deformities of behavior, deformities of just medical deformities, misshapen.
Teeth issues, chronic dental issues, and a lot of it's musculoskeletal issues, often on the face, for whatever reason, and that children have a lot of growing pains. They'll cry out in the middle of the night, not during the day, only at night. Very, very painful, and in the long bones typically, not the joints. Sorry, I should be clear.
Okay, so extreme destruction, self-destruction, amoral is the syphilis state of mind. insanity or fear of, that's another thing. Along with destruction and insanity, we have this general characteristic of falling apart, emotionally falling apart, physically, the immune system, other things are falling apart. And even around the syphilitic person, their computers, their electronic devices, their cars, their washing machines just have this tendency to break and fall apart, in their presence, right? They just have this falling apart energy, this destructive energy.
Watches,
Mm-hmm.
toasters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so again, back to our OCD, we have the ritualism of syphilis, the perception or feeling of entropy, the world is falling apart, nihilism, nothing has any meaning in the world.
They try to compensate by lining everything up and putting things in a sense of order, and they go back and check the door that they've locked it 14 times. They have the horrible feeling at work that they left the curling iron on.
Exactly. The essential characteristics, I've already said, things break or fall apart, accidents, like sports injuries, car accidents, all the ways we kind of crash into other things and twist our ankles and do all this kind of stuff. Corrosion, erosion, worse from sundown to sun up.
Yeah, these are the patient timelines you see that have so many accidents and near misses, and they're in the kitchen, almost cut off the whole tip of their finger. Yeah, it's chronically breaking down.
Mm-hmm. And we have someone put in the comments of an example of syphilis. A Brazilian expression, she says, is dedo podre, which means rotten finger. I never heard that, of course, but yeah, that's a good example. Like when we're talking about people, things breaking apart and everything.
Muchísimas gracias.
Would this present as suicidal at all?
Very much, yeah. And again, in the extreme overt sense, someone actually thinking about it, planning it out, actually doing it, to the more subtle forms of people just kind of living in a depressive state, and kind of having a feeling or an emotion that life would so much be better if they weren't in it, right? If they can leave, like, again, there's a broad spectrum in there, but it all comes down to that same kind of syphilitic feeling underneath.
Yeah, insidious self-destruction. They'll start a university course, they do great, get 90s through, and then they're 3/4 of the way through, and they go, I got to quit this. And they quit, and everybody's like, what the heck? You were doing so well. The feeling is they become very non-deserving. So their value, suicide being the quintessential act of lack of inner value, will show up as SIF for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I've already mentioned Heath Ledger playing the Joker in The Dark Knight. I will put up. Just write a note to myself.
Yeah, cutting will show up here as well, Jill. Like you'll see horrible, sad, and upsetting pathology with kids that are self-harming. That kind of thing is very syphilitic.
Mm-hmm. Okay, just do a quick flyby here. All the medical conditions will include alcoholism, addictions in general, bone pains, birth defects, such as asymmetry or distorted features, strabismus, that's where one eye is looking off in one direction, the other eye is looking straight, astigmatism, Alzheimer's, alopecia, hair loss. And this is where we've had the hypo and the hyper. Now we get the dys, all the diseases like dyslexia, muscular dystrophy, dystonia. So yeah, basically we get distortion is really what that dys medical prefix is getting at. Early warning signs: compulsive hand washing, fear of germs, extreme growing pains in children, ritualistic or compulsive behavior or superstitions, tendency to depression, apathy or indifference. And yeah, that's pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah, and now you're seeing it with masks. Like we have a lawyer we go to, she puts the mask on and takes it off 40 times during our, when we go there for a consultation for anything. And that's a very syphilitic gesture. Fear of germs, but I'm not fear of germs, but I do have a fear of, like, which is it? It's very like OCD behavior. They'll grab the door with a piece of paper towel after they've washed their hands, for example.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Okay, extreme versions of syphilis, and actually it gets even more extreme than this, but yeah, cold-blooded killer, like a serial killer. That is pretty extreme, but extreme depression, life has no meaning, suicide. So yeah, we get to this real, some of the darkest zones of the human, the human psyche, the human feeling for life and everything. It's really, really, really dark. Um, yeah, someone just put a comment about, let's just say it's related to germs and some of our modern medical condition. I'm not going to use any words right here. We're trying to preserve
You've
our.
already done enough damage.
I've already
I
done
know.
enough damage. Yeah, I said some bad words. Yeah.
Yes, you did.
Okay, and the final of the chronic miasms, we have the Lyme disease, or the tick bite, and here we have another characteristic rash. It's like a bullseye, which is very, very interesting, and that it actually speaks also to the state of mind, right? Like someone, like if they feel they're being targeted, they're kind of they're going to be taken out or what have you. There's someone out to get them. So yeah, so Lyme, of course, is the ultimate continuation of all the miasms, and where we just came in the syphilis. Very dark thoughts, a very, very heavy energy. They can have fixations, bizarre or violent thoughts. Alienation actually is a good word. Back to my slide where I had one word for each miasm. Alienation could be a good word for Lyme if we wanted to go and edit those and change them up a little bit. Withdrawn, yeah, they
Modern day hermit.
Yep.
They're the person that wants to go off into the cabin and escape society and just be left to their own devices.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just said that with those exact words. We're withdrawn,
Oh.
urban hermit. Some men are islands. Yeah.
Yeah, and we happen to be in this place right now. When before this all transpired in the bit years ago, I was like, are we all going to go to cabins and be preppers? Like, is this going to be the latest state of mind? Like, how is this going to get orchestrated before it happened? And then, of course, as soon as the whole big P thing unrolled, I was like, oh, there we go. There's the Lyme gesture right there. So everybody's stuck in their homes, not able to go out, no restaurants for you. No, no, no. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so yeah, we get medical conditions including autism, literal Lyme disease, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, heightened sensitivity of all the senses, inexplicable pains, amorphous conditions affecting skin, joints, mind, nerves, immune system. So yeah, it's kind of it's the modern mystery disease as far as Western medicine is concerned. It's like they are kind of going crazy trying to find how to diagnose this, and well, the symptom is here, oh now it's over here, and now this week it's like this, and now the patient is having this problem, and it's just it's and this is the nature of the disease, is it's almost ungraspable. Now we've grasped it as far as once we see it as a miasm now, but until you have that, it's a big mystery and it's frustrating. And the insurance companies don't know. It's like, oh well, how do we code this on the insurance forms, and like how do we give a definition for if we give insurance coverage or not? So anyways, this is kind of the big the bad disease that's really messing up the whole medical system.
Yes,
right now,
and what do they give in the allopathic realm? Antibiotics, meaning against life. And then what do you have? Well, now you destroy the person's immune function. And then what do you have? Well, worsening of the paralytic and chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia, and all these symptoms just become ratcheted up because now you're not operating based on principle.
And I'll just put this question right up. We'll just address this straight away. It's the question on, do we use Lyme as a miasmatic remedy? And this is a new one for me. And yes, and we didn't really talk about this going through all these miasms today, but yeah, medically, like from our medical point of view, the treatments, and this will be a technical word, actually here we go Greek again, but we use the nosodes as the primary treatment for each of the miasms. So yes, the Lyme nosode for the Lyme miasm, and I'm not going to go through all 8 of them right here now, but yeah, that basic principle of the nosode is where Hahnemann came to into treating the chronic or the constant chronic diseases again. Where he went from the acute miasms now to the chronic miasms. Remember that slide at the beginning. this was, this is the basic principle there. Now, at the same time, whatever the symptom expression is for a patient, we'll treat at the same time with whatever the individual symptom remedy is for them. So it's kind of a multi-layered approach as far as the medicine goes for us. But yes, just to straightforwardly answer this question, yes, we do use the nosodes at the deeper level of the constant nature of the disease. Okay, so I've done this slide, and now we have the early warning signs for Lyme: a strong aversion to social activity, slow to recover from illness, don't know how to connect emotionally, early autistic spectrum. So yeah, so that's pretty straightforward. The extreme expressions: agoraphobia, we've talked about that already, complete shutdown of the immune system, mysterious conditions which can't be diagnosed, I already mentioned that. Okay, so now we have officially made it to the end of the formal presentation, and we'll come into the question period. As we mentioned, we do have some already pre-submitted questions, so I will start to go through those. We will continue to watch your comments. We'll bring those in as live questions as well, but let me get straight to that. So, oh yeah, and by the way, I have people who submitted by email. I don't want to make any assumptions or presumptions. If somebody wants to be anonymous or wants their name to be known or whatever, I'm just going on the conservative route. I'm just going to call everyone's questions according to the first letter of that person's name. You as that person, you'll recognize your own first letter and you'll recognize your question, but I'll keep people's anonymity as an assumption here. So I have two questions from letter G. Number one, I would love for you to discuss the miasmic treatments, their effectiveness and important significance and relevance of the psychospiritual realm. So kind of a little bit of a broad hub of questions there. They're kind of all related, but I'll come at that from one point of view to start with anyways. And this kind of brings us to, like, I'm looking at particularly on this question of the effectiveness, or when do we, like, this question kind of came up in a few different ways in our questionnaire. So we're going to come to different aspects of this question as we go through here. But this question of effectiveness, or when do we come to the end of the miasms, when do you completely cure them? And that, we kind of touched on that at the beginning intro section. When we have the law of similars, like cures like, it is a law of nature. It is eternal. It is always true. It is always functioning. Just like the law of gravity, you don't wake up one morning, floating off of your bed, going up near the ceiling because the law of gravity forgot to work that day. Well, no, laws of nature are constant. They're eternal. They're always there. So same with the law of similars, like cures like. We have this law of cure. So when we cure a disease, guess what? We've cured the disease. It's gone. Now that's true. That's conceptually true. In principle, that's true. But what this question is getting at is also something that needs to be addressed. Is what about at the practical level? Well, how long does it take? How can you be sure you've gotten all the way to the end? What if you're kind of still having residual symptoms related to the miasm? So that's where, as I said at the beginning, I showed the three jurisdictions: the regimen, the medicine, and the education. That's where the full treatment plan, going through all three of the jurisdictions, brings someone to a complete cure. Now, that can take longer, it can take shorter. There's different life histories, different medical histories. But yeah, we have this core like cures like, law of cure, but that in marriage with the other two jurisdictions is how we kind of get to the bottom of these kinds of questions. You need to solve all of the regimen issues. You need to rebalance everything. You need to cure all the diseases. You need to deal with all of the third jurisdictions. So yeah, so that can be a process of time, but there is an end. The miasm, we can get to the end of treating the miasms and curing them, but this is I mean, all patients get to these kinds of questions sooner or later in their treatment. It's like, yeah, it can our human subjective experience, we can get impatient, but just so we know, we do have solid principles, laws of nature here, which do get us to the bottom of it. As I say, it's just a question of individually doing that for every person.
So, and Jill brought this up at the break for a moment, really, what's the relevance, of the genetic miasms from the soul spiritual or psychospiritual realm. And that really, just to reiterate, is that before we arrive here on this earth plane, we sign a contract, with our higher self. He's like, yeah, I'll have a bit of cancer, give me a bit of Sora, a little bit of Sif. And, then when I'm born, block that memory that I've signed that. And now I go on the hero's journey during the course of my lifetime to really try and figure out why I keep revisiting these patterns in my life over and over and over again. The evolution of consciousness evolves based on our capacity to figure this out.
Yeah.
Right. And that's why, Rudy Versfor, our mentor, will say that Heilkunst really is the soul spiritual system of medicine that helps people resolve their karmic and miasmic and psychospiritual schisms. That's really our job, is to remove those blocks and shocks to cure, so that a person can have the full reins of their health in a spiritual state of increased grace.
Mm-hmm. And one other aspect, to bring this back around in another place here, that we are speaking, these grand truths. There is cure. There is a law of cure in nature. Yes, we can bring patients all the way through their treatment plan to complete cure, but there is a practical exception, and that has to do with the concept of cellular damage. And I'll use a very more graphic example, like as human beings. Let's say if we've had a limb amputated accidentally or surgically or what have you, that's not growing back. You can go through all your miasms and everything else, your lost limb is gone. Again, that's just an extreme example, but same at any level in our whole physiology, to any point where over time, years and years or whatever, that a given miasm or other things have caused permanent cell damage in someone's one organ or a function or what have you, then the treatment can only go as far as removing all the diseases and doing all the healing in and around that. But once it's kind of something is past the point of no return in that physical sense, then you can't bring it back. Now, to say it, one caveat I'd give to the caveat is that there is a zone where things can be, certain cells can be regenerated, even if Western medicine doesn't think it's possible. Certain nerve endings can be regenerated. Certain, a lot of examples like this. But just to know, there is a point of no return, and once we're well past that, the patient is well past that point in a cell structure or limb, what have you, you can't come back across that line. That being said, the cure of all the other diseases and the whole state of the patient, the health can still go forward, but just so we know, we can't go back on a point like that. Oops, give me a second here. Okay, so question number 2 from letter G. Basically, this is sort of other variations on that first question. What are the other tools? I've sort of talked to this a little bit already. We have the different modalities and the tools across all 3 of the jurisdictions. And one thing I did want to speak to, which kind of gets us into a definition of health, an actual objective definition of health. Part of their question here, I did put it into bold. They said, what if the whole miasmatic treatment does not create a transformation of the patient and unleashing their vital force? I just wanted to stop on that word, vital force. I won't go long on this, but that's a little bit of a broken word as far as I'm concerned. I know people use the word. I know it's people think about that word, but the vital force is it's just the mystical counterpart to Western medicine's solely looking at the material body. We have these doctors over here, they're just looking at your material body, and then we have natural energy doctors or whatever over here just looking at the vital force. But both of those in isolation are abstractions, are incorrect abstractions. I touched on this earlier on today, but just so we know, that word vital force, what we want to get to in a state of health in the Heilkunst context is what we call, I sort of alluded to this earlier also, our physiology being based on the 2 beings, right? We don't have a vital force, we have a dynamis, we have a dynamic interaction between 2 beings. And like I said, the married couple is 4 beings, we have this double physiology. And that's where we start to get into our definition of health, not out of the word vital force, but out of this dynamis, which is kind of in a very real life, real time way, creating our life, creating our consciousness, creating all of the activities going on in all of our bodies. We have this more dynamic approach. So, anyways, very another quick little footnote on a bigger topic, but I did want to. I think that's a very important. The word vital force is a bit of a red herring as far as health goes, and as far as how our whole concept of healing progresses through all of this.
To this question adroitly, what I want to say is I had done the same thing, gone through miasmic prescriptions, finished the Fibonacci series, which I won't get into, but what happened for me is that this chart, based on the physical, etheric, and then more the astral ontic aspect of my own treatment, is that this bent backwards. So I peeled enough layers in my miasmic journey, but I was still carrying significant weight on my frame, which means that there was still inflammation I had not been ready to deal with prior. Then I was ready to take the 25 pounds off, and that produced another exposure of my regimen that needed to be addressed based on huge trauma in my own history I was not ready to expose. So issues that I had been loved, for example, through sweets and sugars and foods, I was not ready personally to give that up over the first few rounds of miasms. It did come up eventually. And then I turned on aspects of my my therapeutic of the anthroposophical and character analysis and the structure of my character that had been deeply affected by that treatment as a child when my mother had committed suicide and my father had died of a heart attack. So I was finally ready, after several rounds of miasms, to actually let go of that armoring. Mm-hmm. Now I don't have the symptoms anymore for the genetic miasms, except in a very superficial way where I go, I know what you are. I don't even have to throw a remedy at it anymore. I recognize what it is, and I can use my sustainable living power to be able to resolve that without it having engendered anymore in my tonic or generative aspect of my living being.
And on a similar note, that's a really, thank you, Allison. That's a really good illustration. We have also a commenter here who's giving us another little slice of this. I'm not going to comment on this so much, but here's just another example of where we kind of need to bring the fullness of the three jurisdictions, especially the third jurisdiction, as this comment is going into, that higher spiritual healing, which you really gets us right to the base of where the miasms even would have come from in the first place in human history. So this is just another way of kind of talking about this idea we've been hashing out here. So I'm just going to leave this here for a second, but it's essentially talking about our ancestry and getting into the genetics of our family tree and what are all the spiritual diseases that came behind that.
The other thing I find super interesting about this is we've done this talk, Hun, over 20 years. Mm-hmm. The questions are phenomenal. They're blowing my mind when they came in, and I got to see them about 10 minutes before this presentation. I'm just like, oh my gosh, like the evolution of consciousness, even in 2 decades, blows my mind because you would never see these types of questions 20 years ago. In fact, people didn't even know what a miasm was, or, Fibonacci series, vital force, life force. Like, this indicates to me that somehow this has penetrated into the global larger consciousness.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, humanity is 20 years older than when we started this. So.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have some questions from letter C. So this is number one, is so kind of similar to what we've been talking about. Why do the miasms continue to show up? And yeah, let's say we've talked about this in various ways through these questions, but yeah, Allison just said it a minute ago, and we've said some variations on this. Yeah, it's just a matter of there is cure of the miasms, but cure necessitates that we remove all the associated blockages, all three jurisdictions, and on and on. I know I'm kind of repeating the same point, but it's so fundamental to, what does cure have to mean when you get to the bottom of it.
And some kids, for example, will go through the first round and not have any physical symptoms, and the parent will say, "I'm going to take a break for a bit," and that's fine. Sometimes they come back a couple of years later, sometimes not. There will always be Heil counselors graduating if Jeff and I eventually retire one day, which doesn't look like anytime soon, eh, hon?
No, there's still a whole lot of disease out there that I can tell.
Yeah. So, and why really the chthonic realm and ideogenic diseases come up after the miasms? If you think about it, and I'll just say it quickly because of the fact that we don't have any time left, let alone a lot, is that when we come into this lifetime, we start out with beliefs. I'm unlovable, I'm forsaken, I'm not enough. And then that produces the fears in the chthonic realm. And these chthonic realm remedies are fears and terrors and ignorance about my true potentiality. That then will create the flavor of which genetic miasms I have signed a contract for before I got here, which then all three of these jurisdictions actually contribute to what it is I will incur with regards to trauma, emotionally and physically, during the course of my lifetime. Right. So it's a combination of these three jurisdictions that actually create what types of traumas I will incur during the course of my lifetime. So people with a lot of terror, fear, feelings of dystopia, nihilism will produce a lot of injuries and syphilitic genetic flavorings on their timeline. Self-harm, lack of potentiality with regards to completing and fully embracing their value.
A question just came in, I see on the side here. There's a basic logistical question. Will you make the charts and graphs available? Like you're holding up your charts there. I know I'll put these up in the notes after we're done. The caduceus chart that you've been holding up, we do have in one of our blogs. I have to find which one it is. But your chart, the one you created in your left hand, Ali, do you have that up on any blog? I forget if you've ever published it.
I looked for it the other day because a patient asked me for the same thing because I use them all the time. I couldn't find it because we've written thousands of blogs. And so, yeah, I have I copied and pasted it and send it out individually. But I will copy and paste that and send it to you, love, just to get at the bottom of this presentation.
Okay, thank you. Now where did that thing? Okay. So, so we got into question one, which is we've kind of summarized in various ways, but question number two kind of starts to touch on something we've touched a little bit on today, but that is, well, I'll read it out. Is it common to have deep fears from the chthonic realm show up after you go deep into treating the miasms, and why? So yes, so that is we've touched on in various ways. And one way, I'll add a new idea here for us, which is, as we have these chronic miasms in the pathogenic realm, right? They're infectious, originally infectious, now they're genetic. So think of it this way: when you have any infectious disease, from the common cold to whatever you catch going around the office or anything else, there's no such thing as pure infection, just in the sense of germ plus human being equals catching a disease, right? You have to have something else fundamental, which is a susceptibility or resonance to that specific thing, right? That's why in a group of people where a germ is going around or whatever, some definitely get it and some will not, because they're not susceptible to it. So why, this is a very basic fact of infection and everything, but why I'm saying it in this context, if you look at the grand history of humanity, going through all the ages and where we picked up all these chronic miasms in history, at certain points along human development, humanity as a whole was resonating with certain, let's call it spiritual lessons, what humanity was going through in our different phases, and therefore we had that specific resonance for particular chronic miasms along the way, right? This wasn't just a random process, but this was a very instructive process to humanity over the millennia of what we were working on. So, and actually, let me ground that a little further. I talked about the susceptibility to the common cold or whatever. When you look at children, as they're growing up and they're going through their developmental phases, they will go through all those classic, or in nature, I should say, not so much anymore, they will go through those classic childhood illnesses of chickenpox, measles, and so on. I'll kind of be careful with my language around here, but those are very meaningful childhood diseases. Like each one of them is meaningful to a very specific stage of growth. So anyway, that's just my smaller scale illustration there, but at a larger level, this is exactly what happened with humanity picking up these chronic miasms over the ages. Is we grew into and then out of specific resonances and susceptibility as we went through each of these ages. So back to the core question here: the chthonic realm, the deep fears and anxieties, the ideogenic realm, which is not written in the question but is implied, in this whole context. Yes, this is exactly what happened in treatment-wise. As we clear down through those miasms, we more and more come back to that original base of susceptibility of how they even came into humanity in the first place. So yes, we have to get through, the chthonic realm, the ideogenic, as part of this clearing out the susceptibility itself. So that's a little bit of a longer explanation there, but that's really what we're getting at with going through all these phases of the treatment. Okay. Oh yeah, L1. So we had two people whose name starts with L. So we have an L1 person and an L2. Here's L1. They are asking, do we do it, i.e. miasmatic treatment for life? Do they become subtler but still there? So again, we've kind of gone in and around the nuances of this question. But what did I put? Oh yes, that's right. In my own, I left some notes for myself to remind me. So yeah, we do. There's a sort of a whole dimension we haven't talked too much about today. So yeah, we're talking all about disease, and miasms are disease, and we have the law of similars, and that's how you cure disease. So yeah, we're focusing on the topic, which is good. What are these diseases? How do we cure them? What do the symptoms look like and everything? But the whole other side of that, once you cure a disease, there's a whole realm we can really explore. I'm just going to mention it here. Is when you are now free of your disease, you have a state of health. Imagine that, right? So again, that could be a whole topic unto itself. Well, what is health, and how do you measure it? How do you observe it and notice it? And how does it manifest itself? So yeah, the more and more those miasms get cured and kind of just bumped right out of your system permanently, now we get into, rather than having symptoms, now we get into this whole zone of really unfolding ourselves in this healthy state. Health isn't just a pure simple state. It's a state that we unfold stage by stage by stage. We keep adding more parts of our healthy self, like a Lego kit or something. We just keep, let's add in this Lego kit and this Lego kit. Like we just keep adding more and more to that whole state of health. So we're in my own example to myself here, if we've cured the state of mind of Sora, which is about poverty and lack, and there's not enough and everything, when we start unfolding our healthy self without the miasm, without the disease anymore, what are all the different zones and stages of unfolding of, well, how much abundance can you bring into your consciousness and into your state of mind and into your emotions and your relationship with people. It's like this is a process of health unfolding rather than disease. So at one level we could say, oh yeah, we're back in the fall season again, and like there's Sora coming back around again. But in a very true sense, Sora may be 100% cured as far as the disease goes, but that doesn't mean the journey of healing stops, right? Like healing is with us our whole life. Like that's why we're here, right? To keep expanding ourselves. And it's just giving that example of the Sora is, yeah, we're expanding on that positive state of mind rather than the disease that became the blockage, of that given miasm.
Hahnemann did a great job in Aphorism 9 in the Organon der Heilkunst, which is the German title of his well, the most incredible piece of maybe literature in our time. We liken it to the Bible or to Shakespeare's works, but he wrote in Aphorism 9 the definition of health: in the healthy human state, the spirit-like living power, also known as autocracy, enlivening the material body, the organism as dynamis, holds sway unrestrictedly and keeps all of its parts in admirable, harmonious, and vital operation in both feelings and functions, so that our indwelling rational spirit can freely avail itself of this living, healthy instrument for the higher purposes of our existence.
Yeah. I've heard that many times, but it's beautiful to hear every time.
Yeah. And how many systems of medicine actually define health and what you're shooting for, Tex? I mean, what a concept. And it's not an absence of symptoms.
Yeah, it's a positive state unto itself. You're right. Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so here we have now a question from L2. Yeah, and this is getting specific to the conditions around the thyroid, Hashimoto's, and her question essentially is, is it for herself or in general, is this more environmental issue, causes from diet and other environmental issues? Is it an inherited genetic thing? And ultimately both, right? Again, back to our three jurisdictions. It's not only both, it's all three. We can talk about our three jurisdictions. But yeah, depending on the patient and their individual history, their medical history, their family tree, what's in that history, you're going to get more. The answer is going to swing more into environment and lifestyle, or more into the miasms and the genetics, depending on that individual history. So that's about the most generic answer we can give, is to say, we have to individually assess what's going on there.
On our website, though, there is a testimonial by a patient who had Hashimoto's and major thyroid issues. Just look those up, because you'll see there that we have been curing individuals of those particular labels.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for reminding me. Yeah, I'll attach that into our notes once we wrap everything up into a blog post.
Okay, I will provide that link for you.
Okay. Okay, so here's a question from letter R. I did do a little bolding here just to remind me what part of the question I want to focus on. The question says, I would like to hear about how people have benefited from doing the chronic miasm work, if there is any measurable evidence of improvement, or maybe it is just preventive therapy. Okay, to quickly start with question 2, no, it's not just prevention, it is curative. We've been talking about that. We have the law of similars, that is the law of cure. So to cure a disease is to cure a disease. But yeah, it is also preventative, because any given person in their history will have many or all of these miasms present in them, but at any given point in their life, they may not yet have any symptoms. So in this sense, we go through clear their miasms, and those are cures, right? We are actually curing those from their genetic inheritance. But in a sense, we can call that prevention, because they haven't had the symptoms yet, but that doesn't mean they didn't have the miasms yet. It just means, we are preventing those symptoms from ever presenting in their future medical history. So it is both. It's prevention and it's cure. But I want to jump more into question number 1, this business about measurable evidence. I will briefly, again, it's a bigger topic, but I'll briefly say, so for something to be measurable, for it to be objective, in our Heilkunst sense of diagnosis, we are dealing with very objective elements, not objective in the allopathic doctor sense, who sends you for a blood test, or or measures your blood pressure or things like that. That's one aspect of objectivity, of what's going on in the physical body. But we are doing a much more full objective diagnosis, which has to do with the state of mind of the patient. Has to do with the objective feeling state of the patient. And these are objective things. Once you understand what Hahnemann taught, and how we connect those things to specific miasms and specific remedies, there is a profound objectivity, and we can access that. In fact, that's exactly what we're doing in our sessions with patients. All the questions we ask, the discussions we have, we are finding our way into that objective layer of what I said, the patient's state of mind, the patient's, the pure feeling state that's underneath all of the symptoms. These are very objective elements. And as a consequence, in the spirit of this question, yes, we can use those objective elements to diagnose correctly and give the correct remedy and cure the disease. And also, we use those same objective measurements to see what changes in the patient, from one visit to the next. We can see these objective elements, as I'm calling them, the objective state of mind, the objective feeling, are changed. They're improved from one visit to the next, by the time they take the remedy, and we see that change. So these are extremely objective as I'm describing them, and these are so foundational to Heilkunst. So I appreciate this question, because we need to, in many, many ways, kind of teach ourselves how to get out of the allopathic way of thinking and how to get into the Heilkunst way of thinking. As I say, there is a full range of objectivity that we have complete access to in our system.
I'll read a very quick testimonial from a patient. I never thought it would be possible, but here I am today, free of all thyroid prescriptions. I started seeing Allison nearly 2 years ago, and I must admit, believing I could be free of prescriptions was hard to swallow. After all, when my physicians told me 20 years ago that I needed to take Synthroid, he said it would be for the rest of my life, and I believed him. To kickstart my thyroid journey, Allison suggested I follow a thyroid diet. I decided at the least I wanted to be healthier and happier anyway, so what the heck. I eliminated all caffeine, started exercising, cut way back on sugar intake. A little over a year ago, I was able to cut my thyroid meds in half. Then this year, I was able to eliminate it entirely. I take a kelp and iodine supplement daily for support, but that's it. I feel great and much more energetic too. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, we have pages of those, which is so awesome. Yeah, it's not like being in any other field. I don't think it's so exciting when somebody says, my son's not in the autism spectrum anymore, or I don't have to take this prescription med anymore, or, it's just the most rewarding work I can imagine.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so here, we have 4 questions from letter S. This one, the number 1, is a question about why does any given individual have more of one miasm dominant in them than another, or 2 or 3 or whatever. I mean, this gets into the general question of family tree and what gets passed down genetically, and how does that actually happen? Why is there concentration, you could say, in one piece of the family tree over here, not in another? And that's to put it in Heilkunst terms. I mean, we can there's many dimensions of how we talk about genetics and how we can look at that, but purely in the first way I talk about that is even at a more basic level. We know even our basic features are passed down genetically. Who has blue eyes and brown eyes, and blonde hair and brown hair, and other kinds of basic features like this. We know it just kind of distributes in certain ways across a bunch of siblings. These 2 siblings got the blue eyes, and this one got the brown eyes, and it's why is there a distribution? Well, there some of the things we've already touched on today. Partly there is there is kind of a spiritual predisposition. And individuals have their own spiritual issues that they come into life to deal with, so they are going that's going to form things in a certain way. They're going to draw on this genetic factor or that one to make up their curriculum, to go through life as they need to go through it, right? Same with the chronic miasms and the diseases. But as I say, beyond that, we can get more and more kind of a sophisticated answer, but that starts to give us kind of a general orientation and a structure to how to start thinking about what's going on and what's being passed down. And one more thing also, where some of the miasmatic predisposition comes from. There's a whole topic in Heilkunst around the basic, the genotypes, right? The basic personality types. We haven't mentioned that here today. That's its own presentation. But yeah, based on somebody's natural personality type, they are going to have an innate predisposition for certain miasms over the others. So for example, a sulfur constitutional type, they're going to have a stronger natural predisposition to the psora miasm. I'm not going to go into great detail, but just when you know the structure of the sulfur personality and their physical characteristics, you can see why there's a connection to that particular miasm. So we can go through all of the personality types and draw these lines to particular miasms, and you get a little bit more of a resonance factor that's going on there. Okay, question number 2.
In my case, it seems I have 2 to 3 miasms that are most prominent out of the 8. Are there people who have no prominent miasms? If so, how did they manage to be this way? And are they typically considered to be the healthiest people in society? And on the flip side, are there people who have 6 to 7 prominent miasms, for instance, and are they most sickly people in society? It's amazing because the intellect thinks of things very much in black and white. And so sickly versus healthy. Well, yeah, we just read Hahnemann's definition for health. And for why spiritually people ask for different loads is a question that cosmically, if anybody has access to that realm in a pure and clean, healthy way, then I would love to hear the take on that. But yes, we all have them to varying degrees. We have met only one individual, I think, and Jeff and I know who that is, was a colleague studying with us and had one timeline event. It was his father's passing, and that was it. Did he have genetic miasms? We asked, and he said yes, to varying degrees, but typically not as strong as some of the others. I think those people have a very refined spiritual function as maybe guides during the course of this lifetime. For other individuals, I know myself, I came in with a wickedly heavy load, along with major childhood trauma that took me quite some time to wade through. But all of our patients are very different and very unique on that so-called scale. And so, yeah, just very variations in colors.
Yeah. And here's, we gave the little mini history of Hahnemann and how he even came to discover the chronic miasms. You'll find in his writing an amazing note that he made. The first one he discovered was psora, and that led him to the other ones. And psora was huge in his time. And he made this amazing note. He was describing psora. Here's all the symptoms. All these people have it. It's I see it in these patients of mine. And I see it in medical history and But he said, I don't have that disease. It's amazing, right? First of all, he was self-aware. He could tell that, but I mean, there's a larger spiritual meaning to all that, right? He kind of incarnated into his life to be the person to solve the problem of psora. So yeah, he kind of chose a spiritual configuration that allowed him to be free of psora, which almost no one can claim that, right? But yeah, that was his special karma, you can call it. That yeah, he came to be in that state, being free of psora. So that's amazing, but it totally makes sense that he would have to be true like that for him to have the vision to even be able to do the research he did to see because it's like the old expression about the fish in the water, they have no concept of water, they can't. So we're all swimming in all these miasms as far as our genetics and everything, and it's pretty difficult, like before you get treated and before you clear all these miasms through the Heilkun's process, to even see what is syphilis, what is, like, it's hard to see it we describe it here, we gave you all these bullet points, but yeah, until it's fully cleared in somebody, you don't really have the full vision to really see it in its 3D living format. Anyway, so that's it, my little footnote about Hahnemann to this question, and I'm going to move on.
Yeah, my core, for example, showed lithium.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And we now have mercury fillings in people's mouths, and this is true, and it's contributing to that syphilitic genetic miasm. You know, my mom's suicide was a very clear rendering of that particular disease matrix. But then to see I wasn't completely cleared of it until I had cleared like her lithium, the drugs that she took, all the merc fillings that were put in my mouth as a kid. Like there was just a host of relational issues that I had to go through. One of my pet peeves is that during the course of the last 2 years, allopathy only now has one diagnosis, clearly, because SORA, tuberculinum, metaurinum, even the syphilitic cough starting June 21st. Oh my God, it'll drive you absolutely bonkers if you're in this field, because patients are like, I've been diagnosed with the C word. And I'm like, for the love of God. Yeah, because they've turned up the bloody diagnostic thing so that everybody now gets diagnosed with the same thing. They're not very bloody inventive because they only have one diagnosis for everything, which to me is such a disrendering of a true principled system of medicine and drives me absolutely crazy. I mean, genetic miasms have been coming up for hundreds of years, but now seemingly there's only one diagnosis from the allopathic field.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So don't let anybody pull the wool over your eyes that it's not even been isolated, that particular so-called disease matrix, which is not. It's a bloody superficial label.
Yeah. Now here we have question number 3 from S. Now this again touches on a lot of the variations of questions we've had about, you know, do people need more than one round of clearing the miasms? How is this determined? Now, I've talked about this earlier today. You know, we have those 4 bodies: physical, etheric, astral, ontic, and depending on, you know, how deeply your family tree miasms got lodged for you individually into each of those 4 bodies, will kind of determine, you know, from 1 to 4 miasms, how many is appropriate or necessary for a person. So yeah, that's just kind of a general, you know, kind of a structural thing of what's going on there. The other thing too, and Alison, you alluded to this in another example you gave a few minutes ago, but the if somebody may, you know, come, you know, and do a certain piece of their treatment, you know, to clear their timeline, maybe do a round of miasms, maybe 2, and then maybe it won't be for some number of years later, you know, a later stage in their life where their life force kind of becomes ripe to start tackling a subsequent round of miasms. So yeah, there can be a little bit of a staging, you know, for various timings and reasons like that. Okay, so let's go to question number 4 from S. Oh yes, okay. So basically the question asks, well, you know, can't we just go, why do we do the timeline? Why do we clear someone's shocks and traumas? Why don't we just go right to the core, which is the chronic miasms? It's a good question. It's a good practical question. You know, why don't we just get right to the root? You know, it's kind of logical. But you know, to kind of draw on one of Hahnemann's explanations and one of his basic principles, you know, we have the law of similars, like yours like, but you know, so that's wonderful. But what happens if there's a disease and medicine gets applied, you know, from your allopathic doctor? They do this, they've been doing this for millennia. They apply a drug which is not a similar, so it's not curative. Well, then what does that mean? Oh, that means it's going to be suppressive. So now you have that original disease, and now you have a new disease. You know, this is actually, we gave you the category earlier, the iatrogenic disease. So now let's say they gave antibiotics for something. Now there's that antibiotic disease, which has now created a layer on top of the original disease that they thought they were treating, and then on and on and on. You know, the layers just keep adding up. So we have these at our core, we have these inherited chronic miasms, but over the generations, over the millennia, you know, those miasms, as they express themselves in different symptoms, have been suppressed by one drug or one treatment after another. So now by the time we get to our life here today, you know, we not only inherit the miasms, but you know, what we've inherited, you know, like how deeply suppressed they are in the genetics. And then on top of all of that, now individually, we kind of go through our life and we get our own traumas, you know, our own broken arm and this and this and that, and those become further layers on top. So So yeah, as much as we'd like to get straight to the root, there's a lot of debris kind of piled up on top of it. So it's just kind of a big spring cleaning essentially we have to do and clear layer by layer by layer till we can reveal the miasms in their full natural form once again.
It's called the law of succession of forces. And
Yeah.
what Jeff is describing is that even if you try to give a miasmic remedy here in certain potencies, you will not cure the underlying cause outright, because it is this law of the order in which it happens. Science has proven that through Halkin's medicine that that's exactly the case. So what we do is in dropper bottles, drainage and organ support, for example, we give a low dose of menarinum or syphilis and hold that thing at bay, but we're not able to cure it outright until we've completed the timeline. And so then we do them in the proper order, and that's how we get the 98% cure rate that shows all in our testimonials on our website.
Okay, so question from letter E. Could you explain how disease is passed down through genetics? Yeah, similar to a question we just came through a couple of minutes ago, but I will add another layer of idea here. Is we have we have two words that kind of relate to each other, but we have to distinguish between genetics and epigenetics. And in our Heilkun's context, I will actually let me first give the brief distinction there. So the genetics are kind of, you can call it the physical inheritance. I got, like I said earlier, I got my blue eyes from my mother, and I got this, and I got my heart disease, I got this, and I got that. All the physical gene information that's passing down through the genetics. But we also have through the epigenetics more, you could say, our etheric body pattern of things. So partly that can be passed down through the family tree. That can relate to some of the examples Alison was just giving, some of the timeline traumas or drugs and things like that can be passed down. That's more at the level of the epigenetics or the etheric body. So I'm just giving a very, very basic point here. There's more and more sophisticated layers, but yeah, that's the first thing we have to understand in the Heilkun's context. We're dealing with this duality between the genetics and the epigenetics. So I say I will leave that at that. Otherwise we start getting into much more complicated things. But yeah, that's certainly the beginning thought we have to start orienting ourselves. Okay. So that is the end of the pre-submitted questions. We do have with someone we know very well who actually wrote a book about her experience going through clearing the miasms for herself and her child. Oh, wait a minute, Alison, that's you. You wrote that book. Yes, no, I'm just teasing. Of course, I know what that book's all about. So yeah, so this is it's a great real life story. Because a lot of people, one thing is to talk about theory, but Alison is really good at bringing it back down to real life examples and case and starting with herself. So yeah, there are two versions we put the book out in. One is on Kindle and the other is as an audiobook. The audiobook you can listen to for free, and you can find both at our website, arcanum.ca/The Path to Cure. And that is that. That's, as I said, it's a book Alison wrote. She was thankful for Heilkun's and what it did for her son and then herself. And it's all captured in this wonderfully written book. And yeah, you can get it at our website, as I say. And finally, yeah, we do have any number of social media channels. We're on a few of them today, and we will kind of post the replay to all of the channels once we are done today. And you can find all of our alternative channels on our website, arcanum.ca/social. And last but not least, if you are at the stage where you're thinking of becoming a new patient with us, you just simply email info@arcanum.ca and make your subject line new patient or anything equivalent to that, and just describe what you're thinking about, what you're looking at in yourself as far as your treatment in your email. And that, I think, is the end. So I know we're nowhere close to a Joe Rogan podcast. He got 28 hours or something per episode, but yeah, he hasn't even warmed up by this point. But yeah, there we are, the 8 miasms and how you cure them. And
Two and a half hours. Yeah.
2.5 hours.
Jill,
Yeah.
I want to thank you so much for keeping us honest and asking great questions live and in person. Arcanum Holistic Clinic will be sending you a lovely gift. A thank you gift in the mail. So thank you for that. And if you have any other final questions, please don't hesitate to ask or let us know. And we're happy to answer them. And this will be live on our website. And we will put an announcement out in our newsletter that this has actually occurred. And you can listen to any part of it. Certainly have a cup of tea and lots of washroom breaks and whatever you need to get through 2.5 hours. Holy cow, Jeff.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is what happens when you start talking about anything in Heilkunst. You have to talk about all the other little things.
Expands and expands and expands. It's true. All right. Thank you for all our listeners and that you participated today. You asked great questions. Thank you so much. And it's our pleasure to serve you in and out of clinic.
Thank you, Allison and